Welcome to Sage Audio. Today let's look at how to mix an instrumental and vocal. But first, if you have a mix that you need mastered, send it to us to receive a free mastered sample of it with the link in the description. Sidechain Compress Instrumental. For this video, I don't want to focus on how to just process the vocals, since this would be more or less the same as creating a vocal chain in a regular mix. Instead, I want to look at ways I can separate or blend the vocal and instrumental given the limited control that I have with just these two tracks. So for this first trick, let's get the vocal to sit on top of the instrumental using sidechain compression. I'll insert a compressor on the instrumental and then sidechain the vocal, making the vocal the compressor's trigger. If possible, I'll isolate the triggering to just the mids and the highs. Then I'll compress the instrumental by about 0.5 to 1 dB. Let's take a listen to the effect, but with more aggressive settings so that it's easier to hear.
What would I do without you in my life? You blew my mind, you stole my eyes. I don't wanna leave, please keep me on your side. Oh, yeah.
Sidechain, saturate vocal. Next, I want to cause saturation to the vocal whenever the instrumental has a transient. This will help the vocal cut through. Now to do this, I'll need to use Saturn II, sidechain the instrumental, and create an envelope follower before switching it to transient mode. Then I'll click the sidechain icon to ensure it's triggered by the sidechain and link the follower to my drive dial. Now to make this effect even better, I'll isolate the saturation to my vocal's presence frequencies. Let's take a listen and notice how the vocal cuts through more.
What would I do without you in my life? You blew my mind, you stole my eyes. I don't wanna leave, please keep me on your side. Oh, yeah.
If you're enjoying the video, hit the like button and subscribe if you haven't already. It's free and it helps us bring you more videos. Send both to ambient reverb. If the vocal and instrumental sound like they were recorded in different spaces or just don't match, try sending both to an ambient room reverb. I'll create sends from both my vocal and the instrumental, and on the aux track insert a room reverb that I like the sound of. Then I'll blend the effect in with the aux track's channel fader. Let's take a listen and notice how they feel more cohesive.
What would I do without you in my life? You blew my mind, you stole my eyes. I don't wanna leave, please. Oh, yeah.
Boost 3.5 kHz on vocal. The easiest way to get your vocal to stick out or not be buried by the instrumental is to amplify 3.5 kHz on the vocal and dip a little of this frequency on the instrumental. You could also do the opposite if you want the vocal to sit back in the mix. Doing this by only a couple dB is best, but let's use slightly more aggressive settings so that it's easier to hear.
What would I do without you in my life? You blew my mind, you stole my eyes. I don't wanna leave, please keep me on your side. Oh, yeah.
Dynamic EQ on vocal. With a dynamic EQ, I can do something similar to what I did in the last chapter, but this time, create a dynamic band that responds to the sidechain signal. Similar to the follower that we used in chapter 2, this will cause dynamic amplification to my vocal's presence based on the instrumental. Let's take a listen to a few dB of expansion whenever the instrumental is present, and again, you can do the opposite if you want the vocal to sit back.
What would I do without you in my life? You blew my mind, you stole my eyes. I don't wanna leave, please keep me on your side. Oh, yeah.
Use sidechained Gullfoss EQ. For this chapter, let's use the Gullfoss EQ on both the vocal and the instrumental. I'll sidechain the instrumental on the EQ that's inserted on the vocal, and sidechain the vocal on the EQ that's inserted on the instrumental. This way they create space for each other. So let's take a listen and notice how both signals now have a lot more room in the mix.
What would I do without you in my life? You blew my mind, you stole my eyes. I don't wanna leave, please keep me on your side. Oh, yeah.
Use sidechained Soothe 2. Soothe 2 will reduce unwanted resonances, causing whatever signal it affects to become balanced. That said, if we place it on the vocal and sidechain the instrumental, it'll become balanced based on what resonances are too aggressive on the instrumental. That said, this is a great way to have the vocal sit into the mix. Let's take a listen.
What would I do without you in my life? You blew my mind, you stole my eyes. I don't wanna leave, please keep me on your side. Oh, yeah.
If you're enjoying the channel, use the search box to watch more of our videos. Separate with saturation. If we use two different types of saturation, one on the vocal and one on the instrumental, we'll impart unique harmonics on each, in turn, varying the frequency content of each track. Now this helps to create space for the vocal and instrumental. However, if we wanted to, we could use uniform saturation to blend the two. Let's take a listen to varying saturation and notice how the two separate.
What would I do without you in my life? You blew my mind, you stole my eyes. I don't wanna leave, please keep me on your side. Oh, yeah.
DS vocal, boost instrumental highs. Sibilance helps the vocals stick out, but not in the best way. That said, I'd recommend using a de-esser to attenuate this on the vocal, but then replacing these frequencies on the instrumental. This way the overall mix stays spectrally balanced, but doesn't sound harsh. A couple dB of attenuation on the vocal, and 1 dB added to the instrumental with an EQ will work well. Let's take a listen.
What would I do without you in my life? You blew my mind, you stole my eyes. I don't wanna leave, please keep me on your side. Oh, yeah.
Boost instrumental side, vocal mids. Affecting the stereo image is another good way that we can create space for our two signals. Now on the instrumental, I'll boost 300 Hz and 8 kHz and above on the side image, in turn, widening it. On the vocal, I'll boost its fundamental and 3.5 kHz on the mid image, making it focused. Let's take a listen and notice how some of the instrumental gets pushed to the side image, while the vocal has a more prominent place in the center of the mix.
What would I do without you in my life? You blew my mind, you stole my eyes. I don't wanna leave, please keep me on your side. Oh, yeah.
Transient expansion and suppression. This trick is a little less common, but let's try it nonetheless. With the transient expander and suppressor, I'll expand the transients on the instrumental only slightly. Then, I'll suppress these same frequency bands on the vocal. This will work almost like a dynamic EQ, but on a larger scale. Let's take a listen and notice how the vocal sits back in the mix a little, whereas the instrumental moves forward whenever a transient occurs.
What would I do without you in my life? You blew my mind, you stole my eyes. I don't wanna leave, please keep me on your side. Oh, yeah.
If you have a mix that you need mastered, send it to us to receive a free mastered sample of it with the link in the description. Thank you so much for watching.